Work-life balance. It's at the top of everybody's list of desirable career benefits. Now, the Naveen Jindal School of Management offers students help on how to plan for this in their own lives. A podcast, formerly called the Yet Another MBA GOAT podcast, greatest of all time, naturally, has been rebranded as Between Business and Life. An MBA student today, a balanced professional tomorrow. It's another way that the Jindal School seeks to prepare students to become effective leaders in their future roles. The podcast offers new episodes monthly, featuring thought leaders who have achieved success in their careers, as well as an excellent work-life balance. Each episode is designed to equip students with the knowledge of business trends while inspiring them to manage both business and life. Now here's Lisa Shatz, Assistant Dean for the MBA Programs at the Jindal School. Take it away, Lisa.
You guys, thanks for tuning in again to our next podcast of Between Business and Life. Today we have an AI expert who is difficult to introduce because there's just so much here, but I'll try and pack it all in. Kris Fitzgerald is a Navy vet and a retired CTO from NTT Data, about a $35 billion company for which he was in charge of the U.S. business in healthcare. He does all kinds of things now, apparently more busy than he was when he was working, including heading up our advisory council in the engineering school here at UT Dallas, being a guest lecturer and mentor and all kinds of other things here in JSOM for helping our business students on boards of startups in the AI space, and also apparently quite a house builder for Habitat, which you've been doing for 27 years. So that's a whole lot. Did I miss anything?
Well, sometimes going on holiday and seeing my wife.
Which we're going to talk about that when we talk about the balance part.
Exactly.
But we're going to start with AI. And I think I just want to start by giving a quote that I read, which is the World Economic Forum said that it's estimated that by 2025, AI could displace 85 million jobs, but also create 97 million new roles. So we could get into whether or not it's creating or getting rid of actual jobs, but more interesting is just the size of that, the context. That's massive. If you were to give a definition for those who don't know a whole lot about AI, how would you define it?
AI, or I call it augmented intelligence versus artificial intelligence. A great way to define it is how do you take such things as natural language processing to understand words, machine learning, which allows me to use machine to get a lot of concepts faster, and apply those to solve a business problem much faster than a human. And so the term AI, if you go back to us geeks of a long time ago, usually meant that, you called it the Turing test, that if you were to interact with AI, that neither you nor it would know you're not human. Today, it's more used for anything to do with these technologies that allow us to absorb data, process it, assimilate it, and provide answers really, really fast. And because AI is, I'd say, more of an impactful term than call it NLP or ML or those things, it's been used to kind of bring all of those together.
Well, when we were young, I think you'll agree that this was all part of science fiction, right? It was terrifying. There were movies about the machines taking over the world, and now we're all using it every day. What is an example for those that aren't very familiar of the simplest form of AI that people might see every day?
Well, if you think about something like a Siri, which is how can I listen to someone's words and understand what they said, go do some research and give you back an answer. Okay. Now that's evolved into things such as Gen AI or ChatGPT, which are large language models, where it's basically I ask a question and I get back a very cohesive answer versus press 1 for this and press 2 for that. We all see that almost every day in our searches, in our driving our cars. It's powering all those things around us.
And some of us are loving getting used to that. I use ChatGPT all the time. I used it to create this original list of questions for today, which I then went back and added some of my own. So it's definitely a saver of time. What's the biggest disadvantage you see right now?
A lot of people don't understand that two things. First of all, whatever data it has used to learn is all that it knows. So if I give it data that everything in the world is blue, then all the answers it gives back are going to be blue. So you have to have a bit of understanding of where did it get the data, and therefore, how do I validate or trust the data? And so forget the whole comment around bias. Even if there's no intent, if it learns from bad information, it could give you a bad answer. And so people tend to get the answer and go, oh, that's right, and don't revalidate what made you think it was right. And we get lazy, I'll use that phrase. Oh, I got the answer, I'm done, versus I now need to validate what I got.
Right. And that's great for people who do that, but we know not everybody does. Where this kind of scares me is when I think about the political atmosphere out there right now. We know there's a lot of political disinformation out there. And I'm assuming that these language models don't know to look at a reputable source. So, I mean, there are charts out there that show which sources are far right, far left, or balanced. They wouldn't know to look only at certain publications. Or is there a way to ask the question that you can say, make sure your sources are only, within the unbiased range, or that how would you make sure it's basing it on all the truths and not all the falses?
Yeah. So for the public type engines, you can't. Because you're never going to know where the Googles, the Microsofts, the Metas, and whether you believe they as companies are far left or right or middle. It's whatever they've chosen to learn their data from. Now, in a business environment, different issue. So in that environment, what you want to do is you want to have your model learn to speak English in a public world, but then it only uses the data from your business. So therefore, you can make sure that the data I'm using for this answer is real data. So that when I give an answer, for example, to a customer calling in with a question, I know it's right. So in the private models, you'll see, I think, less of that issue because they want to make sure the answer you get is correct. Mm-hmm. But they've learned publicly, but they answer from a private data. Then they know the source.
Okay. So when you think about the things that companies are using, I know where I'm thinking of them, paralegals, in their casework, or chatbots to answer questions for incoming calls. But I know there's stuff out there that's bigger, more impactful, but I don't know what those are. Where's something that you've seen where it's like, wow, AI, they're not doing the little stuff. They are making these massive changes at a high level.
So think of the idea of using images, visual, and applying AI to what I see, and being able to maybe do inventory of a store, real-time, live, okay, making sure you never have the wrong thing on the shelves. It doesn't sound big, but in the case of some companies, it might change their inventory levels from 60% accurate to 90%.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. And what it's doing is literally this camera's going down the rail, and think of a wall of little things of screws. It knows they're all there, they're empty, they're count real time. And so we all think of AI as like a chat, but there's a whole lot of AI that's like image recognition that can change that piece of it. That's very interesting. Imagine having AI look at the back of somebody who has moles and melanoma, myself, and being able to look at that instantly, compare all those to the moles I had 3 months ago and tell you, these are the 3 that have changed by this much, this piece. Go look at those. Wow. So
you just saved yourself a trip to the doctor.
No, because you want the doctor to look at the 3.
But if there's none.
There's none, correct. But the main thing is now the doctor focuses on the 3, not measuring 20.
Right.
So what you're really doing is really changing that nature of I'm really focusing on what I need to focus on, not the administrative or the mundane stuff that they've always had to do because nothing else could.
Right. Yeah. So there's probably not any business out there that couldn't use this in some form or fashion.
Well, you talk about home construction. Maybe swinging the hammer won't use the AI, but planning the house and the arrival of the materials on time and how you make the wood all set up, how you optimize the use of wood.
Mm-hmm. And the inventory of it.
Yes.
We talked about that.
But swinging the hammer, probably not.
Yet. Maybe we'll have robots someday doing all that.
They do. It's just more fun to do it with a hammer.
Yeah. Clearly, there's a lot to be gained from this. There's also, we talked about false information, but there's also just accountability. And we're seeing now where companies are having to be accountable to the things that are happening through AI. So how do you know what to trust? And as somebody who's running a company, how do you reduce that liability or make sure that you are being accountable for the activities of an AI?
So I'll put it in 3 spaces. And I'll use part of this in talking to one of my CIO friends of a large company. One is you have to create transparency. You have to be able to show how did it get the answer. So it's a bit of that trust but verify. Okay. Number two, there has to be a way to validate. Can I test the answer a different way? So for example, if I have AI writing software and I've written 10,000 lines of code today, how do I have something outside of that tool go validate that there aren't any bugs or holes in that code? So I have to have a validation phase.
And would that validation phase possibly be another AI, or does that have to?
No, very well could be.
Okay.
But probably AI plus people spot. But it might be looking for patterns that says, I know here are patterns a person would look for, but it's different than the guy writing it. Okay. The third is probably, I'll call it legal, which is I may have to put in my contracts legal clauses for what I do with AI. So in most corporations, you have a gross negligence clause that unless I've done gross negligence, I'm not liable for just simple mistakes. Well, isn't AI the same issue? So do I have to add to my contracts now a liability clause for AI? And then do my customers have to accept and negotiate that liability clause?
Right.
And then after all of that, think of the public disclosure piece of what's happened, weeks along in various companies. AI comes out, it's very, very wrong. These are, company changing events, that says, wait a minute, this is, so I would say just like when there was a drug problem with, tampering with Tylenol years ago, it became a no issue because they acknowledged it, said we're going to solve it, we're transparent about it, and killed it. Okay. If you try and hide these things, it just creates more distrust.
Right. When you advise startups in the area of AI, obviously they have ethical concerns and things like this as well. But are these mostly companies that are using AI to provide a service to other companies as opposed to having some business of their own and the AI is all for their own purpose?
Number one.
Okay.
They're almost always, so one of them I'm working with has used AI to create a location service. For example, think about if you're in a building today and you have no GPS because you're in the building, and I have maybe safety personnel or maintenance or whatever else. How do I know where you are? And the problem is I want to know also not just where you are, but what floor you're on. Well, they're using AI and a variety of other technology to say, okay, Lisa's on the third floor in the corner office right now. And they're using AI to take sensor data, Wi-Fi data, GPS data, motions, magnetic data to put you within a foot or two of where you are. And it's all AI powered. So they've used AI as a key part of their product offering. It's pretty cool, actually.
Yeah, it's a little mind-boggling when you think about kind of the extent that could all go to. And I'm just envisioning, the old days where all that stuff was in, the Bay Area and just investors just throwing money at all this stuff. They must be going wild with all the possibilities that exist right now in AI.
It is. And I think your challenge is which ones have a financial business impact and therefore do I fund versus which ones just sound really interesting and so forth. And there's probably 10 times the things out there that have more impact but don't sound exciting than the ones that get funded that sound exciting.
Right. Okay. And then even with the ones that are financially viable, who's going to get there first? Because they're not all going to be the next big thing.
Right. And then and how long are you there? What's your plan? What's your exit plan? Are you just waiting to be big enough for someone to buy you?
Right.
Like, ChatGPT.
Yeah. Yeah. So talking about planning, my audience is primarily either MBA students or prospective MBA students. So, we spend a whole lot of time talking to young people about what they're going to do later. And those 97 million jobs are up for grabs. What do I tell my students who are trying to figure out how to be marketable in this world for jobs that don't exactly exist yet or that are kind of just forming? And are there things that they should be doing outside of their regular degrees, certifications, or what should they do to really be prepared for those opportunities?
It's a great question. It's one of my lectures here at Jonsson is exactly on this topic.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. So I put a couple of pieces. One is be very aware of some of the key tech trends that are out there. So get comfortable with that. Number two, understand how they might apply in a business case. So for example, if you're thinking about going into marketing, so instead of thinking about, well, AI is going to take my job, but if you can accelerate and become an AI-powered marketing person, you're going to have twice the power of the person already in the workforce because you've already figured out how to leverage this and drive. You're going to be more attractive. So embrace it and empower your work with it. Okay. The third thing is understanding the business problems you're trying to solve for. A lot of people will say, oh, let's talk about Gen AI. Let me go solve this problem. Well, that's the false answer. There's lots of AI tools. Understand the problem and then what solves it. So as a business MBA, think about the business problems your company might have and say, what technologies might actually change the game, and be comfortable in that business impact, because that makes you relevant. It's not about that new 97 million jobs. This is all about the job that's there today, doing it differently and more effectively. So we've answered kind of how to make the job, your path you're going for, better. Those new jobs that aren't all defined, the nice thing about them is they aren't all technology related. So if you think about things like Gen AI, there's linguistic type roles that are needed. There's natural language type roles. There's arts and sciences. So again, find out what those new jobs are, because right now as an MBA student, you have the opportunity of tweaking or tuning where you go with this. It's more of a challenge for someone who's been in the business world 40 years, and here comes this new tech, and they kind of like what they've been doing. You have the opportunity as a student to tailor where you're going. And the last thing I would say is, don't make any decisions today that would close a door for tomorrow. So if you think about what I might want to learn and do, don't go, I'm not going to do that because it's not interesting. Well, that might close some doors that might be different. So kind of keep a little bit.
It might be interesting later.
Correct. And it might be, I hadn't thought of it that way. So kind of keep that perspective. Be a little bit broader when you come out. Don't be, I want to go do X. No, I want to do L to P. It's kind of okay. And then get skills around that, because you may find once you're in there, you go, I actually like P, not L.
Right.
This episode is brought to you by the UT Dallas MBA Programs, top ranked nationally and in Texas. The UT Dallas MBA combines a robust core with 13 concentrations. You have an option to add a second master's degree. Your choices for that include 5 STEM designated programs. The MBA program has full-time, part-time, online, and other formats. They give you flexibility to fit your MBA education into your busy schedule. The skills and training you will receive are exactly what top employers are looking for. For more information, visit us online at mba.utdallas.edu.
So getting away from the business piece of this, there's AI all over that's fun. And I know you've probably seen some fun things. I'm going to give an example of mine. So I'm learning French. I took a French class. There was no AI in that. Then I started doing Duolingo kind of as an addition. There's a little AI. But now I have another app. I think it's called Memrise. And it is a complete language model where I can say to this app in French, I'm looking for a great restaurant in Paris tonight. Can you recommend some? And the app will say in French back to me, well, what kind of food are you looking for? And so I can practice my language with a real conversation. So for me, that was like mind-blowing. I mean, I just love it. Do you have any examples of other things you've seen that are just AI and they're just fun?
That's probably, I'm not the best person to ask that question, because I don't.
Apparently, I
am. No. But the thing is, because to me, the fun things are more of the things with my hands that are the other side of it.
Right.
Because so much of my day-to-day activity, so I use AI a lot from the standpoint of doing research or, creating documents or creating PowerPoint. So to me that's part of the day-to-day. The fun thing for me is not. It's almost like back to that balance. It's like, I want to read something,
right.
Or I want to go build a house or build Legos, because it's literally, I want to be on the opposite side of all the tech.
Well, and you kind of have to balance, right? If AI is going to be more and more in our life, then we have to have those moments where we just get away from it.
Yeah. It's like, I don't have any Siri or stuff like that in my home. I don't need to say lights on. I'll walk over and push the button. Now, I use it extensively in everything I do during the day, but it's a bit of that. I almost want to have the other side of it, because I don't want to ever forget how to use my hands.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have to admit, I do like my devices at my house. I like to be able to say, okay, everybody come to the kitchen for dinner, and it goes out on all the devices. I do think maybe I like some of that a little bit too much.
No, I wouldn't call it too much. It's also a balance. It's what you enjoy in your life. And to me, maybe that's the message for AI is, what's it going to help you do and that you enjoy?
Right.
The language piece is pretty cool, practicing a language that way. I think you're going to find AI in the fact you'll put an earbud in your ear, you'll be over in France, and they'll speak French and you'll hear English real time.
Yeah.
Okay. And you'll give them an earbud to wear and you'll speak English, they'll hear French. And in fact, you won't care about the language because we're all hearing our native language. And it'll do any kind of language you want. So I can go to any country I want and just change it from French to Spanish to German. Oh. That'll become our translator from Star Trek.
And I'm going to be like you, where I'm going to be like, no, speak French to me. I don't want the AI.
I want to practice, yep.
That's going to be my hammer. So one of the things that we look at in this podcast is really, we've got successful people, did great things in their career, but at what cost, especially for our younger generation that puts a lot of priority on that. So clearly you have a great balance right now. You're doing stuff that you love. You talked to me about, how you love guest lecturing, not so much being the faculty member because that's a lot of work, but going in and doing guest lecturing. But you're retired as well, right? So
theoretically, yes.
You've earned that. What about work-life balance when you were younger? Looking back, anything you did you have it? Did you not? Did you have it sometimes? And would you do anything different?
So did I have it? There's large parts of my career when I don't think I did. Where 60, 70-hour weeks were the norm. I laughed one time when my son did his first job and worked 40 hours and came home saying, I'm exhausted. I worked 40 hours this week. And I looked back and said, I can't remember when I ever worked only 40 hours. I took my computer on vacations and I would do some work in the afternoons. But I would say over time, I got a little bit more balance into only if I had an urgent thing versus all the time. So on vacations, it was like I left an hour or so in the afternoon for calls when I had to, and my admin knew when to reach me. But the bulk of the day was not there. So I tried to create a bit of that more of my time with the family, not time on the phone, but not taking a laptop. My wife would have thought I was sick mentally. So there was a bit of it. I'd say as I get farther along then, when I started doing Habitat about 27 years ago, it became almost the therapeutic side of it. So the balance became not just not working, but something intentional that gave back, but also was enjoyable. And so to me, part of giving back is also what you have fun doing. And I found I actually liked the building part of it, and it's also very therapeutic. As an IT guy, you see computers all day. As a house builder, you're out there with hammers and nails and toolkits and you watch walls going up.
Right.
And so it became a very phenomenal balance to me because, man, you went out there and spent a day whacking stuff and you felt good after it. And it's a total disconnect from the office side of it.
And I wonder too, I know that in our day, there was almost like a guilty feeling by doing nothing, right? So I almost wonder if it's almost like, well, I'm still working hard. I'm still doing something of value so I can justify not doing office work because I'm doing something else that is still value added.
That's a great comment because early on, I also enjoyed reading. And just, now not for business, mostly sci-fi, because as geeks, we all read the sci-fi. We all know those stories of AI back then. But that was a bit of downtime. It was a bit of that was okay. Because they wanted to have that amount of time where it wasn't productive at all, but it was just literally detoxification of stuff. So sometimes you just need that, get away from it for a period of time. It's like the lunch break, don't just eat at your desk every day, because a lot of us ate at our desk every day. At least once a week, go out with the team and have a lunch to just disconnect. So I think, I didn't have as much as I should have probably, but there were times when I made a conscious effort to have it and be very focused on it. But I think maybe that's somewhat generational because you're right. We were almost like if you weren't active, busy, something was wrong with you.
That's right. That was lazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was bad.
And I will say that I think the younger generation has some of it right. I think where they go wrong is by having an all or nothing mentality, where sometimes you look at where you get the most back, right? So if you can invest extra time at some point in your career that you get greater returns than another time, then that's when you should be doing it. And likewise, when you have something personal in your life that you want to invest more in and you get more back from that, then that makes sense. So, as an example, if you're right out of school, that's a time to really lean in. That's going to set your reputation. That's going to, do all those things. You're going to learn a lot of things early on. 2-3 years later, you have your first child. That's probably a time that you're getting more return by putting the time in to your personal life and maybe stepping back a little from those extra hours.
And I think you're spot on. I think family is a big part of that balance, whether it be the child or just your other spousal unit is important, and giving them time. And so to me is that's important because I remember early on in my marriage, we were both working 70 hours a week. And we even said, is this all there is? Yeah. And the point of, if it is, then what does it mean? And we both changed jobs, changed location, and did a 180-degree pivot, and at that point in time had a child. So it became, okay, we need to make this more than just this. And back to your point, we were coming in our career, it's time to have a different pack to it.
Right.
I think the last thing is you got to kind of think about what you want, I'll call it, in that retirement phase. And not whether it's comfort, but do you want to be able to fully retire and literally be able to say, I can do on my own? And comfortable or not comfortable with it, but retire? Or am I always going to be doing some kind of work because I never have to? Therefore, I can do less now because I don't have to save as much. But I grew up with, don't assume the government's going to pay for anything.
Right.
Okay. Save whatever you need to save. Decide how you want to live. And that became the focus. So that when you got there, you could say, now I can at least choose whether I want to keep working or not. I don't have to because I can't afford to live.
Right.
I made choices early to have more choices later.
Yeah. And I did that as well. We invested a lot of time in our work, but also all of our funds. I mean, we didn't have a whole lot of fun back then. Everything got invested in, in assets that appreciate. And we kind of made a decision that we wanted at a certain point to be able to just disconnect.
We lived on one income.
Yeah.
That way, if one person lost their job, you weren't in trouble.
Yeah.
We ate Kraft macaroni and cheese a couple of days a week because it was 25 cents a box. And
I remember those days.
Yeah. And I think, again, that was the balance to say, I don't want to end up being 65 years of age and being worried about my Social Security check.
Yeah. Yeah. And certainly for young people now, they should absolutely be thinking they don't know what they'll have later.
Correct.
So even more important to really be thinking about that. And if their decision is to, not be able to retire at that point, just work longer, then that's their decision.
Nothing wrong with that. But plan for it. Like
Exactly.
my sister plans, she makes a joke. She's going to retire until they roll it up in her wheelchair. But it's her decision also. And it's not like she said, oh my gosh, I hate. No, she likes what she does and she's okay doing it X hours a day, but plan for that.
Right. And in a great world, you'll still want to work, but you won't have to. And hopefully we can all get to that. Hopefully all of our students will get to that. Any other piece of advice for our students?
There's one tagline I like to use, and I've done it for all my lectures, is never stop learning. People ask me what books do I read? Well, I read novels, but I read a lot. But I read periodicals, magazines, blogs, articles, because that's where the current stuff is. By the time a book's published, it's already out of date. So my point is never stop learning because you're going to find and discover things you're like, oh, I didn't know that. And so kind of keep going because it keeps you active. It keeps you young, I would say in that part. And you don't then get surprised by things. So when you kind of get complacent and sit back, you get hit by a truck.
Yeah.
Especially in your career. You could decide, oh, things are going okay. And all of a sudden someone else takes your job. So always be like, what can I do one step better? How can I do this one piece? What can I learn about it? And that will, I think, do well for you. And I say that because at some points in time I got complacent and got hit by a truck.
Well, hopefully our students will take your advice and that won't happen to them. Thank you so much for coming in and talking about AI. I learned a lot today.
My pleasure. Thank you. Live long and prosper.
Thanks for listening to Between Business and Life, brought to you by the UT Dallas MBA Programs. To learn more about how an MBA from the Naveen Jindal School of Management can help you develop the skills and connections you need to live your best life, visit us online at mba.utdallas.edu.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Between Business and Life. Join us online at betweenbusinessandlife.com to find episode notes, links, and more. Be sure to subscribe to Between Business and Life on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcasting app. If you like what you hear, please leave a 5-star review. That will help spread the word about the podcast and UT Dallas MBA programs. To learn more about the UT Dallas MBA programs, visit us online at mba.utdallas.edu.